Hello everyone, welcome to Career Theory. We are back with another episode. I am your host Devkumar Sachinthal. I have my co-host Bharat Ramesh. Today we are bringing another impactful guest, Rushab Kamdar. He will be joining us shortly and we are going to spend a lot of quality time talking about how we can elevate with the help of personal development your career.
Hello, Sai, and welcome back, everyone. Today we have another powerful guest, Rushab Kamdar, and we will be talking a lot of things related to business and making an impact on your life. So let's get into the show right away.
Thank you. Hello Rushab. We are super excited to have you on the Career Theory. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey there, Sai. Hey there, Bharat. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Awesome. So to briefly introduce, Rushab is a wonderful dad and a loving husband. He's a serial entrepreneur, professional speaker, and a business coach. When we met Rushab for the first time, we got this sense of Superman hiding in a suit. Real life work experience for Rushab started at a very young age when he was helping his dad's shipping business while doing his MBA. Rushab has a brilliant framework. He calls it as a Think Business 360. It just blew our mind when we saw it for the first time, and it can be applied for anything that you are looking at from an inspirational or from an entrepreneurial perspective. With that, let's dive into Rushab. Rushab, welcome to Career Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
Wonderful.
We are really excited, Rushab, for this special one.
Thank you. Before we start our podcast, could you navigate us through your journey for our audience, the same journey that you told us?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The journey I told you was in a different setting, so may not get into some of the stories that were shared at that moment, but I can give a really nice high level journey that hopefully your audience can relate with. Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur for almost 2 decades. During that time, I've owned and operated 8 companies, not all at once, but there have been some moments where I was running multiple companies at the same time. And some have succeeded and some have not. And I've learned quite a bit in the entrepreneurial realm during that journey. My businesses have spanned over 10 industries. So having seen business operate in so many different facets really gave me a view that not many people have experienced. And through that, I had developed, as Sai, you had mentioned briefly, a framework called the Business 360 framework. And that essentially is a 30,000 foot view or an eagle-eyed view of the entire of business, or a map of business, as I would like to call it. And it basically organizes the fundamentals of business into buckets. And when you can organize things into buckets, it gives you a very clear mind. So I took this journey I had in the entrepreneurial world, and I thought that this would be very helpful, not only to the entrepreneur, but also to the business professional. If you're working in a company, you're a business professional. If you're an MBA student who's looking to get their business degree, you are a business professional. And of course, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business professional. So that's just a short little summary there. I'm sure I'll touch more onto my experiences and some journeys that I walked through as we go through this interview.
Absolutely. I understand that you are more into business, and since you worked on many businesses, you had a lot of this experience. Does business really gives the freedom that the people crave for in terms of their time, in terms of their finances? From your experience, what do you think?
So I think a lot of people like to look at things as black and white, right? Many people will say, if I was my own boss, I can buy my own time back or have my own time back. I can make my own app and I can make a lot more money. And the reality is the grass is always greener on the other side. So what that means is that although, yes, you can be an entrepreneur that may only work 4 hours a month, maybe, and still make a ton of money, not even a week, a month, and you can still make a ton of money. But the reality is, and it's an answer that everyone hates, but the reality is it depends. That's the answer. It depends. And it depends on what is it that you're doing? What is the business or service or the product you're selling or the service you're offering? The industry that you're in, the customers that you serve. And it also depends on you as a person. What is your focus level? What is your motivation level? What is your work ethic? What is your ability to be productive and ability to be a leader and delegate properly and all these other things that fall into place? To answer your question, Sai, it can be, but it also can be very fulfilling to work in a corporation where you may be moving up, getting huge bonuses, executive titles, or even working at late stage startups where you sign on for a lot of equity and you go public, and all of a sudden you're sitting in 7 and 8 figures of liquidity. So it really just comes down to what you're aligned with, what business you choose, and entrepreneurship, like everything in life, is a risk. So I think that's the best way to put it for the listeners.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I have a question related to the same. If someone wants to start a business from the scratch, like in your life, you have done it several times and you've been able to break it down to the minutest level possible. If someone today wants to do the same, what is that one thing you would want them to think about differently?
So if it's just one thing, I think the simplest way to put it is take the step. Take the chance. We are very easily talking ourselves out of things in life, and that could be one of them. You don't want to get to a point in your life where you have a what if and regret. But if I can expound just for 15 seconds on that, I would say don't be too perfect, trying to get all your eggs in a row. But at the same time, don't be too lazy about it. Too cavalier, too egotistical, thinking that you may know everything. There is this, what I call the 3 bears example. One is too cold, one is too hot, but you want to get just right. That middle ground is where you have to play with. First of all, preparation is key, but sometimes people are too over prepared and they overanalyze. Right. And then when you don't do enough preparation or you are not analytical enough, you may miss a lot of things that can be very costly when you start. But the big thing is you take that chance.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
perfect. And on the same line, is there a skill that you would suggest where they should start? Because sometimes what happens is we look at business as if it's a big giant and we get scared very easily and we don't know where to start. So what is that skill which is very much needed to get the business up and running and also be successful? Because again, like I said, you have done it several times. Where is the possibility to fail versus how you can learn and improve? So what is it like?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to skills, it's a very broad word, but it's one of the reasons I created the Business 360 framework.
Yes.
It's mainly to give people a foundational but organized understanding of business. Right? There's a lot of things that can teach you foundational or fundamentals of business, but then to separate it into its own category in itself, so that when you're looking at business through my framework's lens, you have this confidence all of a sudden. You're not lost in business. And I think that's one of the hardest things where people get lost. You can develop massive skills of objectivity and organization through the framework in itself. But another thing I would say is more than a skill, I think maybe a characteristic trait that I think an entrepreneur needs is the drive. It's the enjoyment of the journey.
Right.
And what happens is there's too much right now out online specifically where you're seeing entrepreneurs or those that are posing as entrepreneurs in front of mansions and driving Ferraris and on yachts and these lavish vacations. And I'm going to tell you, as someone who's been in the business for 20 years, and I was a multimillionaire in my 20s. And then through some other business experiences in my 30s, I was knocked off the millionaire status. And then I had to work my way back up. So I've seen the top and the bottom.
Got it.
And what I'll tell you is that mansions and Ferraris and all these things, there's no immediate fulfillment. right? So you need a trait of actually not chasing the dollar. The characteristic trait should not be chasing a dollar, but it should be, the characteristic trait should be liking what you're doing. Really, I know some people who they reinvent themselves every two, especially in this online space. I know people who reinvent themselves every 2 months. And to me, the brand hit you take, first of all. And then second of all, you can't stick with one thing and the consistency. And that's because they're not fulfilled. They're not finding alignment.
Yep. No, absolutely. That was a perfect answer. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, when we met, you mentioned something about personal development. Why would anyone consider personal development for the career? Does it make any sense? Or is it only for people who don't believe in certain things? They should only go through this cycle of personal development?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be the first one to volunteer myself into a scenario of, I was anti-personal development for a long time. And it was not the exact words of personal development. I was more anti-coaches and mastermind groups, because to me, for whatever reason, I don't know where it came from, but I had a negative disposition towards it. I looked at it as if those are money-making schemes. And that's probably a great transition to explain one of the biggest downfalls of any business professional is assumption. I was assuming, too many people assume. And when you assume, you're essentially making you're putting a thought in your mind on something you haven't walked through. And so I don't want to go on a tangent here. I want to answer your question, but what I'll say is that for me, personal development, when I finally took a chance and I said, okay, you know what? I don't know everything. I may have had all this experience, but I don't know everything. And then I realized the burden that was lifted off my shoulders by recognizing, wow, that person who I'm listening to walked a different journey, and I can learn so much from that. And then that person in the group also speaking something that I don't even know about. And now now people are all together, and there's a community and a support. And now you're opening up and you're leaning on each other. And I'm telling you, the freedom that you get out of it, one is life-changing. And then the second thing is it keeps your mind in a space where you become a sponge now, where you just want to constantly learn. You constantly want to grow, because when you think of everything, you put yourself in a box. Now think of staying you're claustrophobic. You're in a confined space. So when you realize that I don't need this box, I can keep growing, and there's no limit. Now the freedom, you can breathe. There's space to grow. You feel like the opportunities are endless. So it's more a philosophical way of talking about personal development, but I think that's what people need to hear. You know, and there are some bad programs out there. Don't get me wrong, but just like there's some bad restaurants out there, you still give it a try.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. And on the same line, were there any limiting beliefs you overcame through personal development? Are there any examples which our audience can learn from? Because a lot of the times we all have those limiting beliefs, and personal development can at least help you get through them. So what were yours when it comes to that?
Yeah, another awesome question. Definitely. I think everyone's had limiting beliefs, and myself included. To give you one example, I mentioned how I've been successful, and I've also been on a downfall in business and then had to work my way back out. When you're in a downfall, your confidence gets hit. And then the limiting beliefs come in that you're not good enough, or you can't make it again, or there's just basically a lack of self-confidence. And when you have a lack of self-confidence and you don't believe in yourself, now you second guess yourself. You ask yourself too many questions on whether you should take that next step or not. What's going to happen if you stay in that world? If 20, 30 years goes by, you're going to go live in the world of regret. And so when you enter some of these personal development programs, and it depends on what it is, whether it's development for your business or development for your personal growth, or spirituality, or anything else that's between those. One, it's the support you find in these groups. We human beings are not meant to be alone.
Yes. We need a tribe.
You need a tribe. And I will tell you, this is just a little tangent, but when I was all these years when I worked in companies, I've had companies where it's just a family business, just my father. And I've had companies where we've had massive numbers of employees. And I'll tell you, when it's just my father and I, and I'm walking into an office all by myself, and an entire day goes by, and let's say my father's on a trip and I'm just in the office, and then a week goes by and 2 weeks goes by and you're eating lunch by yourself, and it sucks because you're alone all the time. And so when you're finding support and you can talk to people, you can communicate with them, there is another level that it takes you. But coming back, I wanted to just go back to the question in hand. Yeah, there are limiting beliefs, and there's many limiting beliefs out there, whether it's fear of failure, whether it's lack of confidence, whether it's just general confusion into what your goals are, or whether you're disorganized in life, or whether you're just looking for that community. Personal development is something that you can do on your own, but most of these programs out there have communities and groups, whether it's virtual or whether it's through Facebook groups or whether it's through physical meetups. It's massively important and can help you, specifically if you're someone that suffers with limiting beliefs.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, talking about the growth that you mentioned about, how can someone find an inventory of skills? Because in order to have growth, they need to have the certain skills. Sometimes the skills can be hard skills, sometimes the skills can be soft skills, or anything in between. Using your business 360, can they find an inventory of the skills?
Yeah, I think you can find, using the framework specifically, areas that you probably have your largest strengths, and then you'll find areas where you're pretty weak at, which you can then develop the skills. So I'll give you an example. My framework, as I mentioned, I teach this to business school students. So MBA programs across the country have me host workshops for their students, specifically for them to help them land jobs. Now, how do you help people land jobs? By thinking about business. When you can think business, you can talk business. So first, it's networking. Second, it's how to attack specific types of interviews. But the biggest thing that for them is, what are their superpowers, right? And so that's where it relates to your question. Using the framework, I show these students how they can identify what their fit is to an organization. And when you can identify your fit to an organization, you can also identify the areas where you're not aligned or that you don't fit with an organization. And so maybe those areas you may want to develop or strengthen up those skills. And that's a powerful thing, because a lot of times when people are in an interview, for example, and the question is asked, why should we hire you? It's a very difficult question to answer for most people. But when you can identify the value you bring to a company, it's going to be very easy for you to answer that, because now the skills you're bringing. At the same time, privately, you will know which skills you may want to work on.
Lovely. That's actually really powerful, because a lot of the times, especially I've worked with several young students where they've been struggling to answer those questions. Why should we hire you? Or tell me a situation where you had to deal with difficult employees. Tell me a situation where you had so many clients within the business who are not willing to work with you because of reason. Is there any example or quick tip that everyone should be able to use to get through such scenarios according to you?
I think just in itself, the questions you ask, and there's so many resources, even online by a quick Google search, it is so important for people to have those questions if you are a job seeker, and to know how to answer those questions. That's the preparation part, right? Sure. To stay prepared. And I'll tell you, just, you asked me for a quick example, but I'll tell you, and it's a slight correction, Sai, when you were doing the introduction, when I got out of undergrad, I had two avenues to walk. One was I had standing offers from a hedge funds company. And then I had the choice of working in the family business, which is in the metal commodity business. We were buying large ships like oil tankers and cargo vessels, and we were bringing them to the Indian subcontinent where they were being demolished for their scrap metal. Essentially, it's what we call ship recycling, because you're recycling the materials off that vessel. And that was very exciting. Hedge funds is hedge funds, yes. But in that business, I travel the world. I deal with various different cultures. And then it's an entire preparation, logistics, capital intensive, dealing with letters of credit, finances, negotiations, contracts. It gave me the gamut of what entrepreneurship is. So that's the avenue I chose. Now, what happened was I did that for 6-7 years, and then I got my MBA. And during that time, there was that business, there was another business, there's a third business, I believe. And then I did my MBA. And at that time, when I did my MBA is when I started thinking, maybe I should go work at a company. And because of the experience I had up to that point, consulting was the most logical route. So I thought that when I applied to consulting firms across the country, this ego I had as an entrepreneur, I thought that I was going to have these companies lined around the block waiting to hire me. But what I soon came to realize is that a entrepreneurial resume is not equally received as a traditional career progression resume in corporate America. Companies like to see a specific track record of improvement on the resume, working at possibly Fortune 500 companies, getting your MBA, and being specified to a specific skill set or role or position. I was very generalized. And so what happened to me is I had to network to get my foot into the door. I had to speak and connect with people. I couldn't go the job application route. And so to your point there, Bharat, the example I can give you in this scenario is that someone like me who doesn't have all these companies under my belt, I started connecting, talking business, creating a business rapport. And all of a sudden, these gatekeepers who were essentially employees that were connected to me by my friends who work in corporate America, once they were like, oh, we think this guy's good, I started landing interviews at top consulting companies. I landed interviews at McKinsey, at Oliver Wyman, at Alex Partners, Ernst & Young. Just there's a bunch more. But the point is that, yeah, you have to figure out how you can leverage your skill sets in a world that is a dog-eat-dog world out there. And yeah, I hope that hit the nail there in the head.
That absolutely answers that. But talking about networking, what kind of preparation that someone, let's say, for example, someone who is not used to networking or who is like shying away from networking, but still wanted to go take this route, what kind of preparation that they should do either in their head or on their paper to really have their step or their foot into the networking domain?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you, I was an introvert most of my life. And for the most part, I still relate. I still align myself as an introvert. I'm what you call an extroverted introvert, right? And that's a different conversation in its own. But for those that are shy in networking, what I'll tell you is that the question you asked is what they should have in their mind side. The mind is, I should go out and talk to as many people as possible. That's the mindset that they should have. And on paper, it's the preparation of discovering what their superpowers are, how they impact a company, and really putting their professional experience into my framework on the way I've laid it out for those specific people. Of course, it's hard to explain on a podcast, but when they have a visual in front of them, and if I instruct them, they'll understand how to do that. Now, why those two are important? Their mindset is saying, let's go talk to many people. The work on the paper is their preparation. But all of that is just planning. Planning is nothing without implementation. The implementation is to go out. That could be finding networking groups. There are many apps out there. One is called Meetup. I did that when I was launching my consulting practice, just to go out and try to get a small entrepreneur, someone that's like a 1 or 2 person shop, just to hire me. And that's how I made my consulting company bones, by scratching at the surface before I can really get into that world. But yeah, and talk to friends, talk to sisters. If, for example, someone is interviewing, there's Facebook groups out there of just people who are interviewing, where you can find accountability partners, right? There's personal development programs like we talked about earlier. And you join those programs. We all know a friend of ours, her name is Lauren, Portfolio Rocket. Join her group and you'll get a support system, and you can talk to those people and you move up. So the point is, that's the step people need to take. They need to actually go talk. They need to practice.
Absolutely. So basically, to summarize, what you're saying is, if you are an introvert who wanted to get into the networking zone, the first thing is prepare yourself on the paper or prepare yourself in the mind about what you're going to talk to. Then look for the groups if you can find someone in person, that's the best thing through Meetup. But if you can find someone through online as a footing in, go hang out into the groups and start adding value to the groups. That's how they'll be able to help you back. And I believe that's what you have done with your first consulting, to have the bones on your consulting company.
Yeah. And what I would say there, Sai, is that even if you're preparing,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that whatever you prepared cannot be refined. So whatever you think and whatever you put on paper, but you still have to, don't wait for it to be perfect. You go out and you practice. And when you speak to other people and you go to some of these support groups or development groups that are out there, or Meetup, as I was mentioning before, the point I was trying to make is that the only way you get better is by practicing. Right. If as you mentioned, I do speaking. Believe me, from where I am today and where I was a decade ago is massively different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's so much you learn by constant repetition. And really, for those that are introverted out there, I know it's scary, but life is not meant to hide in a corner. Life is meant to be lived. No one's asking you to get in front of an audience of 1 million like on TV. This is take baby steps first. First, start with a friend. Then maybe start with 2 friends at the same time, and then maybe expand yourself out. And then if virtually is perfectly fine, you can hide behind a camera and still do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
There are so many applications lately where you can just meet random people and learn from them, for sure. And for our audience, I just wanted to say, if you are worried about networking and you're not able to get your foot in, we are right here. We will be able to get you what you need to get there. Yeah.
We just walked the same path. Like when we started this podcast, it's not perfect. I don't know how to speak, but we just started, and through repetitions, every time an episode is recorded, we are trying to refine and adjust certain things and then come back to the podcast in terms of lighting, sometimes in terms of the questions that we come up with and how we research. But it's overall, when I go back to my kids to talk about stories for the bedtime, I really take these podcast stories and tell them, because every guest brings up such a value. I change those into kids stories and tell them as a bedtime stories. It's such a fascinating journey for me.
Absolutely. And to add to that, how did we met Rushab was in something similar setting where like we went to a in-person program and we were able to find Rushab out of that program, who's been adding a lot of value to every single person. And guess what? He's in our network since then, and we have never missed an opportunity to meet every single week, possibly. So that's, I think, the best example I could give, where it can happen as long as you have that intention to find your proximity. And it can keep changing as well. Sometimes we need to outgrow the proximity at times, but you'll get there. If someone is worried about finding the proximity, we will help you. If not, it'll happen naturally as well. So thank you, Rushab. Thank you so much for that answer. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's a good message you're putting out there.
Absolutely.
And it's important. It's important to follow that message for any of the listeners.
Yeah. Thank you. With that, I want to ask you, because you worked as an employee, an employer, and you worked with having a restaurant, and restaurant industry could be like a side hustle. Now, from your experience, what is the difference between a business and an entrepreneurship and a side hustle?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a business is essentially, the way I look at it, is already running company with possibly multiple owners, executive team, employees, and the system is there. It's not to say that when you say what's the difference of an entrepreneur, because you're singleizing it. You're basically, there's entrepreneur, there's solopreneur, which to me is the same thing as an entrepreneur. So I try not to get into all that. But an entrepreneur is, for me, in my opinion, is someone that's essentially taken the risk to start a business.
Which is like
right?
a pre-state of a business, like a beginning stage of a business.
No, you could be someone that's an entrepreneur that's 20 years in. An entrepreneur, see, to me, I don't want to confuse this, because as listeners are listening, there's no right or wrong answer in this scenario. So I'm going to give a very opinion-based answer here. But you have people who are entrepreneurs, and then you have people who are wantrepreneurs. There are people who want to be an entrepreneur, but they talk big. They say they're going to do X, Y, and Z, going all around everywhere. I can do this. I can do that. I'm better at this. I'm smart at that. Oh, that's easy. That's without ever having walking the shoes, without actually ever having executed or implemented any of the things that needs to be an entrepreneur. And there are those who actually, those entrepreneurs have started businesses and have fizzled out within a month or 2 months because it's not what they thought it was. A real fun example I'll give you is I've been married now for 14 years. But I remember there was actually this year will be 13 years. So my wife's listening to this. Sorry. But
you met 14 years back.
I was doing the math in my head. I was like, that doesn't sound right. When we had a wedding planner, event planner, I should say. And throughout the years after my wife and I got married, a lot of our friends got married around the same time and people were getting event planners. And then I started learning a little bit about that industry. And you'll find so many people who were younger who jumped into event planning because they thought, this is great. I'm going to be, it's easy money. What they didn't realize is that they have to give up their weekends. And when you're young and you're used to having your weekends, and then all of a sudden you give out your entire Saturdays, and then you have to wake up 4 a.m, 5 a.m, because the ceremony is that early in the morning, like at 8 or 9, and you have to get things ready. And then you have to be up till real late night. There were so many people fizzled out. So that it was the entrepreneur mentality. And just so I'll summarize it here. To me, a business, entrepreneurs can run businesses. I don't want to put too much of the differentiation. If you have a business, like I have a business, but right now it's just me and I have a small team. Right. So I don't want to say that you need to have multiple founders and executives to have a business, but a business is a business once you are operating, earning revenue, and providing a product or service. An entrepreneur is someone that's taken a risk to launch that business. And then a side hustle is something that has the potential to become a full-fledged business, but you don't have to put that much time into it. It's not taking away from your day-to-day life, and you're earning some cash or money on the side. And that's why it's called a side hustle. There are many people that are working 9 to 5s, but they'll drive an Uber on the way home because they make some extra cash on the way back. It's a side hustle for them.
Awesome. Right. And you mentioned someone who's just getting into this sudden business, which they are not aware of and have to lose their weekends. How was your journey? Did you ever have to lose your weekends? Because I know you've been into different industries, and also even current day, how's your schedule like? What is your routine like?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I'll tell you is before anybody ever takes a journey, I think it's a good point to put out here. I'm a big believer in understand what your product or service is and understand everything about it. Start with that. Learn your product, learn your service. My first experience on that was when I joined the family business. My father basically took me on one trip with him. That was it. Then the next trip, he said, there's a fishing trawler out in Russia. I want you to go there. And we had a partner at the time that was there as well, and said, I want you to go there with our partner, go buy this thing, negotiate it. And he purposely told me that don't go over this price. It was some price, a price that was impossible to do. And I think he knew what he was doing. He purposely put me in the lion's den. And I went there without really understanding what is of value in this specific product, which is the ship. And I actually went $25,000 over the floor price or the ceiling price that I was not supposed to go above. And because I didn't know what I was looking at, there was actually a piece of equipment that was $250,000 worth of value that was missing in it. Wow. So we actually took $250,000 plus the 25,000 above the price loss on that business. Wow. And it was a hard lesson because coming from a South Asian family, I got reamed out for it. But at the same time, I recognized that I better learn the product. So what I ended up doing, I spent the next 2 years pretty much in India. And every time one of our ships came or any other ship came, I stayed with those that are the actual breakers because we didn't recycle them. And I went on each of these ships and I learned every type of ship, everything you're supposed to learn, what is of value, what is not of value, what are the areas you have to look at. And I just basically studied the entire product.
Wow.
Wow.
But to me, I think that is a very important step for anyone that is about to jump into entrepreneurship. Now, to your question specifically, those that may have to give up weekends and things of that nature. Yeah, I had a hospitality business that I got into that I didn't want to get into. Again, that was one of those being the good son, and I co-signed on a loan. And then I had to end up taking over that thing and then selling that business. I gave up weekends and I hated that. And you asked a specific question on schedule.
Mhm.
And why that's important is because when I was younger, I put so much of my time and focus into the businesses, plural,
Mhm.
that I missed out on friends' weddings. I missed out on trips with people. I missed out on happy hours. I never got to live the traditional life that most people were able to in their 20s. And there's a little bit of regret I have in that. But I also know that the experiences I had, I would have never gotten it if I lived the typical or general life. And so I've had crazy schedules before. I'll probably bring it to current day so I don't continue this ramble, is that I'm more aligned with work-life balance. And I know that meaning is different for many people, but I give a lot of time to money comes, money goes. I told you, I've seen both sides of it. There's not much of a difference. What's important is the fulfillment that you want in life. What are you happy doing? And I'm telling you, yeah, money can make things easy in life, but there's countless stories. I don't have to regale them of multimillionaires that just are depressed and hate life. Money is a short-term happiness. The spending time with family, spending time in the business that you love. So my schedule these days is that I work in my morning till 5 p.m. usually. Kids are home by 5 p.m. from school, and then I try to give the evenings to them. And then I'll do some development. I'll after my wife and I spend a little time together, I'll read a book or read a book, some chapters of a book that I'm reading. Or I get all my exercising and meditation, all that out in the morning.
Awesome.
Otherwise, I have a terrible day if I don't do that. Like I just feel miserable. So I get that out. But yeah, my goal, that's a good point. My goal is to get to a point where I'm working only 4 days a week and I'm playing golf every Friday. That's the goal.
Yay.
Wow.
Nice.
Someday we will join you there.
Fascinating. I also wanted to remind our audience that when we met Rushab, he said something really powerful during the event, and he was presenting that time that if their kids ask them anything, they would leave. Both Rushab and his wife would leave everything and sit with them and explain things. So that's the quality time they spend with the kids. And I know I'm not doing the best with respect to how I'm sharing the information, but Rushab, do you want to quickly share that as well? Because I want to make sure that audience understands the importance of quality time with the family. And it's not about grinding all the time. It's not about running behind things all the time, but also taking care of your own life and family.
Yeah, it's funny. It comes from when I was younger and my father would be on an important phone call. And my brother I have a younger brother and older sister. If any of us were playing and we made noise, we were reprimanded pretty harshly. And it was hard as a kid because the gravity of business phone calls was something that we couldn't materialize in our mind. The concept of it didn't make any sense for us. And so I knew the feeling that it had, but I think there's a more important part to that, which is it made me fear my father.
Wow.
So when I became a father, I realized I wanted to ensure that I don't ever want my kids to have a fear of me. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And we're all South Asian. And so a lot of people from our culture can resonate with that. The iron fist of the father and maybe even the mother. So what Bharat was saying is that if I'm on a call, let's not say a call, because a call, my kids come in, I won't yell at them, but I'll just say, Daddy's on a call. Once I finish this, I'll answer. But if I'm in the middle of some work, and there's always a balance in this, but if my kids come in and they're saying, Daddy, I don't understand how to do this homework, or I have a question or something, I will stop and I will answer that question because I want them to feel valued. I don't want them to feel like something else is more valuable to them. When we're adults, we sometimes forget how it felt when we were kids. And so I want them to feel valued. Now, there are times where if they come in 3 times in a span of 10 minutes, I'm going to say, okay, this is the last time. I have something important I'm doing, but it's a conversation with them.
Correct.
It's not berating them. It's not yelling at them or any of that nature. So I'm a big believer in stopping. And look, there could be a scenario where you have to just say, hey, please leave the room. It's important. And that's fine. That's understandable, but it's not a consistent habit or something of that nature.
Absolutely. Being a dad, I can resonate with you, especially sometimes it can be frustrating, but sometimes we need that frustration to be happy. So once they grow up and the time passes just like that, once they grow up, they'll never come back because the time is always moves forward. Time is the only thing which will never comes back.
Yeah.
All right.
Correct. Completely agree.
With that, you touched upon your evening schedule as you read books. What is the first book that changed your life? And why should anyone consider reading the books? Because everything is like fingertips away. Why would anyone consider reading a book?
You're going to laugh at this one because it's not a business book. It isn't. It's not a
Right.
business book. But the funny thing is, it gave me, and so here's the thing, I was never an avid book reader.
Hmm.
I was a very avid newspaper reader.
Mm.
I was always reading on what's going on in the world and what's going on in the finance and this and that. I love that. But I don't know why. And again, maybe that went with this negative view I looked at personal development. Right. So it's a question that's really stumped me. But the one I can tell you is the expectant father. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, I read the book called The Expectant Father, and that basically was meant for fathers. And it was, I think each chapter was the month that the mother is in, right? So chapter 1 is month 1. What is she feeling? What are the moods that you will see? And what are the things that the father or the husband should do in order to ensure that the
Wow.
pregnancy goes well? And why that was life-changing for me is because it was probably the first time that I'm reading something that forced me to put myself in someone else's shoes and really understand them. And why that's important is because that's fostering empathy, right? I'm becoming empathetic, which to me today, as someone that's been doing business for almost 2 decades, I think any quality, any leader and entrepreneur should have is empathy. It is the core quality that anyone should have before anything else. It's being empathetic, really understanding what someone else is going through. But it was only after that, and I wouldn't say only after that. I would say it's really in the last couple of years where I started getting a little more into some books and reading them. And I'm still very bad at it, but I've gotten a lot better. Honestly, I'm reading 3 books at the time at the moment, which probably is not recommended, but and one of them is the first Harry Potter book because my oldest daughter's reading it. So she's reading it and I'm reading it along while she finishes a chapter, I finish a chapter. And I'm not big into fiction books. I'm getting into it because again, it goes back to the values, right? Family values. Kids feel like, oh, look, parents are doing this with us together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Talking about thank you. Thank you so much for touching that up. Because when I started reading about what a woman goes through during the first pregnancy for my daughter, it was phenomenal changes that they go through. And the moment I saw my first daughter coming out from my wife's body, it was like, I don't know, I cannot cry, but it was like a moment where I don't even know that there is some liquid coming from these ears that I did not even recognize that. It was a life changing. And touching base to your point of reading Harry Potter books, I think my kids, when they go to the school and come back, they bring these video game books, one of those video game books, and they want me to read. I buy books for them and they bring books for me to read so that we both can play with them. That is very interesting. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, do you want to talk about why should someone spend reading books, or is it more for an entertainment when something can be learned in a YouTube video or through?
So I think there's a lot of people that are different. I know someone that this person's exact words. They say they devour books. They don't just read them, they devour them. And I know many people who are avid readers, just they have an insatiable appetite of reading. To answer your question, I think there are multiple areas of education. And I think you should do all of them. Who are the listeners out here? Anybody should do all of them. Now, it's up to you to put the percentage of how much you want to do that. Some people will do 75% self-development education from books and 25% maybe YouTube and some other things out there. Some people can do 20% and break it out whatever they want. But for me, the benefits of reading is that there's a different way of absorbing the information. And it's interesting. You should try it. Read a book and then listen to it on audiobooks, or watch a show and then rewatch it with the subtitles on. And you'll see a big difference because the way our mind processes with words versus actually listening to it are very different.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think reading has massive benefits. Now, one thing I will tell you is that there's people who are, again, avid readers, but they don't implement that. Oh, I read this, I learned this. I know all of us have either read or finishing up Who Not How,
Mm.
right? It's a
Right.
book about, rather than trying to figure out how to do everything, the question you should ask is, who can help me accomplish the goal at hand?
Mm.
And so it's great as a talking point, right? I brought it up right now, but is the execution being done? Is the implementing being done there? Are we finding our who's versus looking at how to do something?
Mm.
And so there's a lot of business books out there where people will read the methodology, but the execution, the implementation of it is not necessarily achieved. And so I think that's important. If you're a book reader, great, you learn something, now do it.
Great, great. To the audience, what you're saying is, to reiterate, read the books, but take the notes. Without taking the notes, comprehension becomes diluted. And at the same time, once you take the notes in a format that you can take it and apply it to your life or to your business. Otherwise, it becomes an entertainment. And also, the reason why we should read the books versus watching the videos to learn, there is a speed at which at least my brain works for a video versus a book. In books, I can visually create as I was reading through, and I can comprehend and I can recreate the images, versus in a video, things happens at a much faster pace. Sometimes if I have to replicate what I learned, I have to pause the video, make notes, pause the video, make notes, which is quite interesting, but it's a lot of time consuming too.
Yeah, that's a very accurate depiction of what I would say. It's, you take the notes because a book is so long, you're not memorizing 300 pages or 200 pages of something. Honestly, human beings are just, information goes in and we retain a small percentage of it. The concept of taking the notes is huge, especially on business development books. You want to take the key points, put it out there and write it out. In this specific book that we're talking about, Who Not How, an end of each chapter had high level bullets of what that chapter was about. And that's a great thing sometimes if you just want to quickly go back and say, oh, what was the main points? But even on YouTube videos, yeah, I would say that's fine. Pause and take notes. It's the point to add, more fuel to the fire of your point is, reading you can enjoy, but you can forget. So if there are things of value you find, take that extra 10 seconds, 20 seconds, take the notes that you want to take. I highlight, and I don't go highlight crazy. So I know that when I'm reading something, I'm like, okay, that's important. The whole page is not highlighted.
So that the book stays the same color as it was before. Otherwise,
exactly,
it becomes a highlighted color.
Love it. I know we are almost about to reach the time, but there are so many topics I wanted to talk, and I would want you to revisit us for sure. And before we usually finish the session, we do something like 3 rapid fire questions.
Oh man.
Don't worry.
I'm not good on the spot.
I think you did great, even though, I think every other question felt like that. So I'll ask a simple question, nothing crazy, and we can continue. So tell us about one thing that no one knows about you.
But my wife can know about me.
I don't think that's possible for us to, not share anything with.
I used to be able to moonwalk like Michael Jackson.
Wow.
It's just I'm older now, so my knees and feet don't move that way. And I used to do that. Usher and Justin Timberlake and Michael Jackson pop locking, side glide, and moonwalk steps that I used to be able to do.
That was new.
Yeah, that was new. Next time we meet, probably we'll have that.
Yep. A special session to moonwalk. Yes.
A special session.
To moonwalk. Yeah. The next question is, this is more from the perspective of, we hear about the term called success everywhere. We want it to be successful. We want you to be successful. We hear the word success so many times. Now, if you have to define your success, what is the definition of success for you looks like?
Being happy in life. And not to be broad, but I'm saying I have, for me personally, his opinion, and I know everyone's life is different, but I look at my life today and I say, okay, I have a wife that she and I have a lot in common with, and we get along very well, and we love each other, and we experience life together. I have 2 daughters who are completely daddy's girls. I can't do any wrong. that part of my life, I feel like I'm very blessed. I live in a nice house with a roof over my head, and we have food on the table. We have food in the refrigerator. That is happiness. And then I have a business that I'm doing that it's on my own terms. It's what I wanted to do in life. And that business that I'm doing is helping others. I'm helping students land jobs or do better with their interviews or networking. I'm helping entrepreneurs build a business or improve their business. I'm doing workshops, and I'm doing these things that are essentially adding value to other people's lives. Right. So this is not something that is taking or harming the environment, which the family business was. It was the ship recycling business was. And I never was happy. I didn't enjoy that. And this is not a business that's specifically money and greed. This is a business of being of value. So I'm happy, right? That's, to answer your question, it's happiness. It's to find that happiness. And I think a lot of people don't have that happiness. And you have to go through some pain in order to find the happiness.
Brilliant.
And you look at the world today, and there's a war happening in Eastern Europe, and we wake up. It was funny. I watched, I think it was something on social media where someone said, what is our problem today? We wake up and we hear some landscaper with the leaf blower better than hearing a bomb or explosion 50 yards out. Today, we are not asked to be drafted into the military. Right, as men, but there are those that are young boys are being drafted. So you have to look at life in that perspective and say, what do we complain about?
That is very powerful, I would say.
Yeah. So
Very, very
that's
powerful.
success. Success is happiness.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My next question is more about, with whatever you are doing in terms of the personal development, in terms of business, in terms of the success, when do you think you will be done? When can you say, I am done? I'm done for everything?
Knowing me, I don't think I'm ever done. My wife tells me all the time, all the great things I've said, I haven't told you some of my weaknesses that I still need to improve on. And one of the things my wife tells me all the time is that I am my worst critic. I am very hard on myself. I've gotten a lot better. So let me put that out there. When I say a lot better, I'm talking about miles better. But there were times in my life where I would accomplish something and I would just throw it to the back. I wouldn't look at it. I wouldn't appreciate it. I wouldn't pat myself on the back. And that's a very unhealthy thing to do. So to answer your question, I don't think I'm ever going to be done, but I think there will be a point in my life where I will still have my hands into the business world, whether it's through investments, whether it's still doing the coaching or the online courses or any of the speaking things I do, just to give myself purpose in life. And I think that's what people need in life. I can't ever go cold turkey. I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm going to just travel the world and do nothing else. It's not going to happen. We'll desensitize ourselves to that. But the one thing I have told my wife is at the age of 55, which is 10 years before the official retirement age that we deem in America, which is 65. But the age of 55 is probably when I want to live that life. And I'm saying this, I'm not even 40 yet. So I don't know. When that time comes, it may be a different story. That's a hard thing to say, but someone like me, I don't want to be done. I want to keep going.
Awesome.
Right.
No, I think that's the powerful message almost every person is sharing. And really, that's very important for everyone to not think like a regular or average person, but think like you have a lot of potential. You have to live with the fullest potential for the rest of your life, and you'll never be done. That's really powerful. And Rusha, before we end this podcast, I want to definitely let our audience know that we will bring you back because there is much more we didn't tap today into. But if our audience wants to reach out to you, what is the platform you're available on? And also, where can they learn more about what you have to or provide to them so that they can reach out and learn from you directly?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for providing me the platform to share even what I do. If you are a working professional or an entrepreneur, or as I like to put you under the umbrella of the business professional, and you're either looking to launch a business, grow your business, you're looking to become a career changer, get promoted, land a job, whatever it is, my Business 360 framework that I created, I've built it in such a way where it can help you create that strong foundation and then go ahead and achieve what you want to achieve. You can either find me on my brand website, which is thinkbusiness360.com, And or you can find me on my personal website, which is rushab.com. So, and that's RUSHAB as in boy, rushab.com. So think Business 360. Everything I have has the term the words 360, because essentially what we're doing is we're creating a 360-degree view of business specifically. So that's why we have the Business 360 framework. I have a podcast called the Business 360 Podcast, and then my website, thinkbusiness360.com. And all my various products have the 360 attached to it.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll definitely put all those links out in the description for sure, so that you all can reach out to Rushab directly. And I'll also try to put a LinkedIn link or something on those lines so that you can have access to him easily. But yeah, thank you, Rushab. Thank you so much. This was exceptional. And I can't wait for the next time I see you again, because like I said, there is a lot of value we didn't tap into. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rushab. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
No, thank you both. I think this is a wonderful thing that you two are doing for the professionals out there. Love the name, Career Theory. Wonderful questions. I would love to be back. Yes, you're right. And we kept a lot of things on the surface, but there's many more stories and many more examples that I can jump into. As both of you can tell, I'm a speaker and I keep speaking. So feel free to shut me up at any time. But thank you again. And I look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.